we're just around the corner from one of, if not the greatest, boxing cards of all time. February 22nd, Riyadh season, we have a top to bottom banger coming to us. And this is a fight that I think, while it might not be the best fight on the card, I think the expectations, especially for one fighter in particular, might be the highest. That fighter I'm talking about is Shakur Stevenson. I think Shakur Stevenson has the highest amount of expectations in this fight, along with the most amount of pressure to perform well. And I'm going to get into that. Also, I'm going to break down this fight. Shakur Stevenson against the young Floyd Kid Austin Schofield. Schofield wanting this fight, even when his promoter Oscar De La Hoya said, "No, you're not ready yet." Schofield said, "I want this fight," and made it happen. This is going to be a fun fight. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the Never Drop podcast, and comment below. Who do you think is going to win this fight? And do you think Shakur Stevenson has a lot of pressure in this fight? First, let's talk about the fighters. Shakur Stevenson, 22-0, 10 knockouts, 27 years old. He's been one of the best fighters talked about in boxing for years. On the pound for pound list, Shakur has been an elite fighter for years. A fighter that, truthfully, other fighters really haven't wanted to face. There's been a lot of times fighters have turned down a potential Shakur fight. But for some reason, even with the undefeated record, Shakur has a narrative going around that he's a boring fighter. And to some degree, I understand. He doesn't have that many knockouts. I mentioned only 10 out of 22 fights he's knocked out his opponents. But it's not always about that. You look back at the Edwin De Los Santos fight. A lot of people said he ran. With that, a narrative was created. And now, until Shakur starts getting those big fights, he's put a lot of pressure on himself where he has to look amazing. He's going to go against a young opponent, like I mentioned, Floyd Kid Austin Schofield. Kid Austin, man, he's 18-0 with 12 knockouts. He's only 22 years old. A lot of people said, don't take this fight. These two went back and forth on Twitter, which I'll talk about in just a second. A lot of people told Kid Austin, you're not ready, especially for Shakur Stevenson. People at his level don't want to fight him. Why would you do it when you're still rising the ranks? Kid Austin and his father said, we're confident in our skills and we can beat Shakur Stevenson, and this is how this fight was made. Talking about each of these fighters' last fights, let's start with Kid Austin. He had a unanimous decision back on November 2nd against Tellez Giron in a fight that, interesting is the correct word, because at parts of it, Floyd looked great. Kid Austin looked incredible, and then at other parts, he looked very vulnerable. In particular, Kid Austin could have boxed his way easily to a decision, and then later in the fight, he decided, okay, I'll go toe-and-toe and trade with him. Not the greatest decision, as he actually got dropped in the 11th, and he was going back to his corner, missed his stool completely. He really showed a couple flaws in his game that hadn't really necessarily been there before. He opened up some holes, maybe with his defense per se, and didn't look amazing. He could have looked a lot better. He could have just boxed from the outside, got the victory, no worries. Said he wanted to come forward and continue to give these fans a good fight. An interesting strategy, as in the moment it backfired. Kid Austin, lucky. While it wasn't a huge knockdown, I mean, it's a knockdown is a knockdown. But even in past fights, Kid Austin's looked really good. So it's kind of a tale of two halves in that fight. As with Shakur Stevenson, you can't really make a mistake against him. Shakur's going to make you miss. He is one of the best, I believe it's plus minus, or hit and not get hit ranks in the sport of boxing, meaning he hits you and he doesn't get hit. We know Shakur's defense is elite. That's part of the reason people say he's a boring fighter, because he doesn't take much damage. He doesn't get hit that much, and he doesn't hit you with power shots, but he hits you. For Shakur, his last fight was July 6th against Artem Hardantounian. If you remember that name, not only did Shakur fight him, Frank Martin fought him earlier a year before and beat him. It wasn't his greatest performance, but it wasn't Edwin De Los Santos' performance. I didn't like the Edwin De Los Santos performance from Shakur, and I thought he was better in the Hardantounian fight. But Shakur, my biggest issue is he does it to himself a lot of the times. And what I mean is, after every round in that fight, he came back to his corner saying, I'm going to knock him out. I'm going to knock this guy out. Not listening to his grandfather, his trainer in the corner, and just kind of doing what he wanted to do. There's times that Shakur got caught it's boxing. Everybody gets caught, and people want to go, oh, if Tank catches him. Well, I want to think Shakur might be a little more careful with Tank in the ring with him if that were the case, because Hartunian, his power wasn't going to affect Shakur, and Shakur wasn't taking that much power. For Shakur, it's just interesting because he's at this elite level, and for some reason, he just can't get the whole community, the whole boxing community, to buy into him. And of course, he's done it to himself sometimes with things he says and the trolls and some of his performances. But at the end of the day, I feel like everybody has to recognize he's an elite talent. And in this fight in particular, the pressure on him is to look like an elite talent and really not only get a win, but get a dominating win against Floyd Schofield. Is because you got to look at it. How we got in this position. Shakur finishes his top rank deal with that fight against Hartunian. It was clear he wasn't going back to top rank. Top rank wasn't doing him right. He wasn't talking kindly about top rank. Top rank was talking a bit down, showing people leaving at the fight. Okay, that wasn't happening. Immediately signed with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. I believe that was a good decision by Shakur. I thought that was kind of a match made. That was really one of the only options also. I think it was a good decision for Shakur. They begin to try and make a Williams-Zepeda fight. I think that fight would be incredible. Zepeda goes, hey, my wife's giving birth. Not fighting the rest of the year. Okay, Zepeda does fight and then fights Tevin Farmer. A little bit of a duck. But it is what it is, right? Then Shakur Stevenson in line to fight Joe Cordina on the original beterbievbivol fight. Shakur injures his hand in training camp, which should, I believe, cause a little more concern than it has, because Shakur already had hands in the past, he said, hurt. You can look at some of his post fights where he's just chilling in the locker room, immediately putting ice on his hands. To a degree, it kind of reminds me Mayweather in his later stages, and that's just something you want to kind of keep an eye on, especially if someone's hand in boxing, it's kind of turning brittle. I don't know if brittle is the correct word, but just not 100% at all times. That could play a huge part. But that happens. He injures his hand. The Cordina fight out the window. Again, trying to make fights with Zepeda. Zepeda's not happening. Then Shakur not having a fight lined up. Tank is going to fight Lamont Roach. Loma deciding to take 2024, the rest of it off. We don't know if he's retiring in 2025 or not. Starts going back and forth with Kid Austin on Twitter. Originally, it's, young guy making a name, calling out the big guys, which he should. That's how young fighters do. They call out the main names in the division, get people to look at them, get maybe some of that attention, then they go their separate ways. But for some reason, these two kept going back and forth. Then, at the end of the day, Shakur didn't have a fight. So Shakur's like, I'll fight. Schofield's saying, hey, we'll fight, meaning him and his father. We'll take you up on an offer any day. Shakur sends an offer. Then it comes back, oh, no, Kid Austin's team, they're not going to do it. Floyd Schofield's father comes out, says, we're going to take the fight. Oscar's telling us not to take the fight, but we're going to take the fight. Oscar comes out, says, I don't want him to take the fight. He's too young. Floyd Schofield's father sends him a text saying, we're built for this moment. We're ready. Here we go. We have this fight. Is what Oscar De La Hoya is saying correct? 1,000%. Kid Austin is too young for this fight. And truly, I'll give you my prediction now. I think Shakur wins a wide, unanimous decision. But that's not why this fight is interesting. You're not breaking down this fight saying, oh, if he does this, then maybe he can. No, Shakur just has to be Shakur. He doesn't have to be any other version. He doesn't have to do anything else new in this fight. He just has to be Shakur Stevenson. Boring or exciting, Shakur just has to be Shakur, and he wins this fight handily because of the experience. Because Kid Austin has never been under the lights like that. Because Kid Austin, once he gets rattled, not being able to hit Shakur for these first few rounds, he's going to be throwing wild punches. Hey, maybe one lands. That's why there's a saying, he has a puncher's chance. Okay, sure, Kid Austin might have a puncher's chance, but against a defensive tactician like Shakur Stevenson, the odds are even slimmer on that chance. So for this fight, Shakur has to prove himself not only victorious, but a dominant victory. Because at the end of the day, he's trying to make himself look great for the audience, because that Tank fight is what needs to happen. At the end of the day, both fighters have to agree to fight. But I think for Shakur, his route for 2025 is, okay, get past Kid Austin. Then he gets to William Zepeda, and then Gervonta Tank Davis. I think the Zepeda fight, if you're going to look for an interesting fight for Shakur, I think it would be the Zepeda fight because of the amount of punches Zepeda throws. Schofield isn't the volume puncher that Zepeda is, and Zepeda didn't look great necessarily in his last fight against Tevin Farmer. For Shakur, I think that would be the best fight for him to look good. Eddie and Shakur have talked about making that fight second here in 2025 and then the Tank fight. But for Schofield, he's got to go in there and realize he's got nothing to lose. Okay, even if you lose, if you put up a solid performance, think about David Morrell the other weekend. David Morrell lost 9-3 on my scorecard. But I want to see David Morrell because he stood in there and showed while he's not on that level, he can compete against that level, and he's young enough that he can work his way up to be on that level. Schofield, only 22 years old, he can work himself up to be at the top of the lightweight division. I don't think he's there yet. I don't think he's close to that yet, and going against someone as skilled and as great as Shakur Stevenson right now, I think that can really cause problems for Schofield. For Shakur, of course, you'd love to see a knockout. A knockout raises his stock tremendously, but I think he's content on getting decisions. He wins fights. He doesn't care how he does it. He wins fights. You got to think Floyd Mayweather, always around him. Hey, Floyd made a lot of money winning fights. Granted, Pretty Boy Floyd knocked people out. Money Mayweather? No, he was getting decisions. And I think Shakur Stevenson has realized I can do that. I don't have the knockout power, but I have the skills to pay the bills. For Shakur, he just has to make sure it's not a repeat of the De Los Santos fight. And what I mean by that is he's got to stand in the pocket sometimes and trade. That's something that I do think is a little underrated for Shakur because he makes guys miss. So it's kind of one-sided. But if he can stand in the middle of the ring with Schofield and go back and forth just a couple times, you can't be moving around the ring the entire night from the fans' perspective because, hey man, you're running away from a 22-year-old. What are you doing? No, if he can stay and trade and you don't have to take too many punches, if you can make him miss in the middle of the ring, I think for Shakur that will do huge dividends. You make him miss in the middle of the ring and make him look bad. For Shakur, that's what's going to continue to elevate him. Not just running around, grabbing rounds, and sweeping a fight while there's being less than 100 punches landed, right? You can throw and land a lot of punches yourself and make the guy land less than 100 punches, but you got to land a lot of punches. And for Shakur, I think that's the biggest expectation on him in this fight because of the fact he's got to win the people back. And I know you can say, oh, he doesn't have to do anything for the people. You're right. But slowly and surely, people seem to be turning on Shakur. There's only so many more performances where you can have fans walk out of the arena before the fight's done. Quickly, people are saying, okay, I'd like to see Tank versus Keyshawn Davis because Keyshawn's shown he's exciting, will trade, will knock out people. Granted, a majority of people still want to see Tank Shakur, but Keyshawn's brought himself up into that mix. Okay, Shakur needs to dominate this fight. He needs to dominate, and I'm fine with not getting a knockout, like I said. But you have to dominate. Make sure the people know, hey, this kid isn't on my level. He called me out, and he's nowhere close to my level. There's only one other person that could maybe be on my level, and that's Tank Davis. And I think we do get that fight later in 2025. But for Shakur, I think he's got the most pressure out of everybody on this card. He's got to turn in a good performance, a really good performance. Because I said it when he fought Hartunian. He's got to do it. Guess what? He didn't. And people continue to take shots at him, continue to downplay his skills. But for Shakur, this is a huge moment for him because on this huge card, he can show everybody, hey, I'm the dominant fighter at 35. I think he's got a lot of pressure. And for Schofield, he's going in there fighting with nothing to lose. Again, you show a decent performance, people are going to say, okay, shout out to him. He made Shakur not look invincible at 22 years old. I want to see him again later on. I think that's really what this fight comes down to because I'm expecting a dominant Shakur Stevenson performance. But is it going to be dominant in the way that satisfies some people? Or is Shakur going to be going on Twitter, seeing a lot of people going at his performance? I know there's haters, What are the casual boxing fans going to be like? Geez, 3 times now? I want to tune into this guy, and he's just not exciting. I think that's the biggest pressure here for Shakur Stevenson. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think Shakur has a lot of pressure in this fight? Or is it just me thinking that? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Never Drop podcast. That's all I got. We're coming up on a big card, February 22nd. I can't wait. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe. I got all the boxing news coming to you. That's all I got. Peace. I'm out.